We on there now, Robin?
You are.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, my Zoomers. Welcome to 75 Mechanic Street, the home of the grand and glorious Sail Power Steam Museum, finest maritime museum in South Rockland. No, you know I'm right. Those of you that have visited all the maritime museums in South Rockland, you know that this is the best. My wife Meg and I started this museum just 16 years ago when I flunked retirement. I'm Captain Jim Sharp, by the way. We've been sailing all over the world in different vessels, having a gay old time in our retirement. And we were out for a little ride in the car on Sunday afternoon. And we came across that property with a sign that, oh my God, this is the home of the old Snow Shipyard where they built all these vessels back in those years. Right here in the heart of Rockland. I called up a friend of mine right away when I saw that commercial waterfront property for sale sign. And I said, hey, Mark, tell me about this piece of property. Oh, Jimmy said, you should own that piece of property. I said, oh, come on. This is crazy. I'm 75 years of age. I've always wanted a museum. And this looked like a pretty darn good opportunity. So I thought, oh, well, what the heck? I might as well give it a whirl. You only live once. Well, it turned out to be a five-star museum on TripAdvisor. Can't believe what a wonderful museum it has turned into. So here we are. This little dissertation, the old Snow Shipyard. This is part three of our presentations in Captain's Quarters here, number 39 of Captain's Quarters. My God, amazing how many of these we've done. All these guys down here at the bottom, all these reputable looking people, those are all captains from the Maine Windjammer fleet. 12 magnificent sailing ships that sail out of Rockland and out of Camden. If you remember, have you seen part one? If you've seen part two of the Snow Shipyard presentations, well, then you know who this old grouchy looking guy is here. This is Israel Snow. He was the founder of the Great Snow Shipyard. Truly an amazing man and a mentor for many who followed in his footsteps. During his tenure of running the yard for the first 12 years, of course, he took over about 1850, the middle of 1800s. And in the first 12 years of running this yard, he built 15 large commercial schooners. Here's a list of them right here. We went over them in the first issue of our presentations. But all of these, some of them, they built two vessels at in the same year. They've built them in tandem, one ahead of the other. My God, it's amazing, absolutely incredible. 1869, they did that, and so on. Well, a couple of times they had these going, two launchings in the same year. It was really incredible. This, of course, not is even to speak of the great number of vessels that were drawn out on the railways. They had two railways for repairs and rebuilding and as necessary, and they were busy as beavers all that first year that he took over the yard. He lived until 1875. When he passed away, his son, Israel Larkin Snow, took over the business and kept on setting records in the industry over and over again up until his passing just before the turn of the century. He's responsible for most of a dozen of these great big vessels, besides building the reputation of the Snow family business into a very respected, well-run entity all the way up until his passing in 1899. If you look at this list of, interestingly, just quickly look at the list of vessels here. First one lost in a great gale, the second one wrecked, the third one lost by alarm fire. Third, fourth, capsized ashore, Rockaway, Brecco and Rockaway, mismasted hurricane. Over and over again, these vessels met a terrible fate all the way down through until there's only one in the entire show here that had a quiet, acceptable demise, and that was in 1902. William Bisbee, and that's the one in the picture shown there on the side. Well, when Larkin was Israel Larkin Snow passed, his sons John I. Snow and Richard Snow continued, completing the rest of the list down here. And in part two, with the building, the loss of the magnificent schooner Matinic ended part two. And if you saw part two, you saw the building of this vessel. And here, this is her launching picture. Oh my God, what an incredible vessel she was. Look at that gorgeous, gorgeous white hull of hers. Look at the people on deck, wall to wall, elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder. And up on the bowsprit, they're going to ride her down when she makes her debut into the water. People sit on the bob stage there, leaning back against the martingale, and men in the rigging back aft. Oh my God, it's amazing. All the carriages and horses around underneath her. Well, that was the magnificent launching of the Matinic. And as I say, we covered that in the last issue. Finally, the very last picture of the Matinic in 1906, tied up at the Snow Shipyard. It's very, very sad. This, as I say, probably the last picture taken because the poor old Matinic went to sea and sailed out through Hell's Gate February 21st, was never heard from again. Absolutely no trace. So I think this may be a good time to have the commercial. Every good presentation needs a good commercial, and repetition is the secret of a commercial. Got to tell you a little bit about this museum, incredible museum here up in the upper left hand side there. That's the old building of the museum. We added to it these two extensions on both sides and the atrium in the center. We added that to it as well. We were running out of space. Now that's all filled up as well as the main building, and the entire building is so filled up with wonderful maritime memorabilia. It's really hard to describe. We have Nathaniel Bowditch's original backstaff in the navigation department, a complete navigation sextant after sextant after sextant. We'll even sit you down on a stool and we'll teach you how to use a sextant and bring a star down on the wall and get your latitude right there. We have all the dynamite paste and boat shop there with just about every conceivable piece of a boat you can imagine. You can stand there and take one solid hour without moving and look at all of the different things in that particular room, that particular wing. And we have a wonderful Arctic exhibit. We have all kinds of things. You just have to come and see it all. That's all there is to it. Our ambiance around in the dooryard, we decided we wanted to improve. We had a schooner, a wonderful 65-foot schooner, a very beautiful yacht. And we dug a hole and we stuck it in the ground right there in the front of the museum. So you can't miss us. You come down Mechanic Street, first thing you see is this great big schooner. You know now where the Maritime Museum, Sail Piracy Museum is. You can go aboard that vessel. You can have your picture taken by the wheel. I guarantee you it will not rock. You won't get seasick aboard her. Down below is our new building. Oh, three years ago, we decided we just didn't have enough space, so we decided we just had to build a new building. We built this wonderful big building, and we have it all filled up now. You walk in the front door, and the first thing you see is a vessel called the Light Horseman that came over on the Archangel George Weymouth came over in 1605. They put this vessel together and they rowed it to Port Point, way up in the northern part of the bay, Penobscot Bay. And they, in their logbook, they uh, expounded on the beautiful harbors along the way and the great mountains that came down into the water there. And it was one of the most beautiful rivers in the world. And we also have a 35-foot stern paddle wheel wood burning beam launch in there on display. A lot of other engines on display and lots of old boats, 1920s parachutes and so on display in there. Got to come and see that. Over in the lower left is the launching of the Keating, one of the biggest vessels that they launched in the snow yard back in the heyday of the snow vessel building. She was what they call a picket fence schooner, four-masted schooner, and it's a wonderful launching. You can see up on the mizzen mast there. That's uh, John I. Snow doffing his cap to the crowd as the vessel makes 10 knots sternway, headed for the water. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about our skiff SKFM. What's that stand for? Sail Kids for Free. That's our program, one of our programs that we have on the waterfront. We take kids from 8 to 14 years old and we put them in a boat. They may have never been in a boat before. And look at over there on the left side. They're setting the sails, learning how to set the sails and do it right so that they sail these little boats. One kid to a boat, just one there. First thing we do is take their telephone away from them, get them away from the computerized business for a while, put them in the boat and shove them off there. We have a chase boat that tells them how to do it, and they soak it up like a sponge. By Tuesday, they are actually out there sailing around, racing their buddies. You can see on the right side here a great big grin on this guy's face. My God, he's about to swallow his whole head. And that's his buddy in the other boat beside him. He's grinning because he worked his way out ahead of his buddy. Competition, that's the thing. And it consumes these kids. They forget all about their telephone. They forget all about the school and computerized games and all of that. They get so engrossed in sailing. By Friday, as I say, they get a whole week sailing, all free for any kid that comes. And by Friday, they're out there racing each other, all of them in a great bunch going around the buoys there. See who can get there the fastest, do the best job of sailing. Teach these kids to sail, and it'll take their mind off things they shouldn't be thinking about. It's a great way to have these kids grow up. This tickles me. I get all warm and fuzzy. We do it all thankful to you for your contributions. We also have sailing for adults. We do sail training. If you want to hone your skills, if you're a sailor already, grab one of these classic boats. That's the Friendship sloop there in the center, on the left side of the center, and the Herreshoff 12 and a half. Both those boats are antique. The Friendship sloop is the 1920s, and the Herreshoff is the 1925. And way over on the right is Persistence. That's our other Friendship sloop. She's the one, the 1920s boat. We also have a Friendship sloop called Blackjack down in the center there. You see her sailing by the lighthouse. She's the oldest Friendship sloop in the country. Well, in the world, if you want to. Built by Wilbur Morse, oldest Wilbur Morse boat. She was built 125 years ago. And we restored her from the keel up through. Wonderful boat to sail. Down at the bottom, you can see our tent. You can rent our tent down on the waterfront. We're right down on the beach there where we have this great big tent set up for weddings, for all kinds of luncheons, any kind of a function that you have that you'd like to do, a big party. We can do that up to 125 people, 150 people, really. And a fire on the beach where we cook lobsters or whatever. You can see there in the lower left. We have a bluegrass band, and everybody's gathered around there. They're working on their lobsters. And that's what we do down there. We have a very active waterfront, and all of it really is for your benefit, and we couldn't do it without you. And we want to thank you for attending. Donations are very much encouraged and surely gratefully received. Now, let's see, that's enough of that. Let's get back to what we were trying to talk about before, the Snow Shipyard. Well, the Snow Shipyard, of course, went on for 140 years. 140 years, the Snow family ran that yard. And well, it's a hard job to tell it in as little as 140 minutes, but we'll do the best we can. So, take for instance the William Bisbee. Well, right on the launching ways. This is 1901. 1901. The smoke had barely blown away when they launched the Matinic here. They stretched the keel. As soon as the Matinic was down there, they stretched the keel for a new vessel. And here it is, the William Bisbee on the rails there with just framed up her transom and getting ready to put the planking on up around the sides of her. And there are two other vessels here on the railways. You can see one of them, the little bark called the Crow. The what is it? The Kroll. You can see the Kroll now. Rebecca Kroll. And the other, the three-masted schooner. They're in for repairs. But on the old ways, on beyond, that's the Bisbee. Yeah, there she is in frame and getting ready, getting built up. She built to carry 500 tons of the heaviest cargo, much heavier fastenings than most of the other vessels. Proud they were of her. Here's her launching. Um, Her hull painted a bronze green. This was 1902 before a large admiring crowd. Well, wonderful launching. She was immediately put to work. She had a huge load of timber for Noank, Connecticut. Look at how they loaded these vessels. I mean, the decks are practically underwater. You get a sea running here, and it would wash from one side of the vessel to the other. If you wanted to go up and visit the forward house in the galley, you'd have to have a boat to get there, probably, in any kind of a sea running. But when they're loaded with wood, wood floats. They're not worried about overloading them with wood because they're not going to sink. Well, a full load of piling then from Virginia. Then in 1903, she readied herself for a harsh winter. The very next year, 1904, she was run into by the steamer Prunessa and nearly cut in half. Well, my God, she was sold at auction. All those sunk, sitting on the bottom, sitting on the bottom. She went up for auction. And who came along and put in a bid? The Snow family. The Snow family, they knew the vessel. They knew what happened to her. They knew how she was built and how she's put together. And along with a full cargo of lumber that she was carrying, the Snow family bought her. And they raised her. They took her back to the yard and they took her, put her up on the railway there and took her all apart. Here you can see the side of her there on the left side picture. A whole side of a great big hole there in her timbering where the bow of that vessel cut in almost to the keel. Dove all the deck timbers in and everything else, so they had to rebuild the deck besides. That's what they did. They rebuilt her, fixed her up. The rigging was a mess. The masts were leaning, the boats were lost, and she's only 2 years old. Only 2 years old. Well, my God, they put it right back and rebuilt her and did a magnificent job of it, and rightly so, because the very next year in 1905, she was in a terrific 48-hour storm that shifted her cargo, broken and damaged. But she came through with flying colors. Her hull never leaked. Her hull was in perfect condition. That tells you how well they had put that vessel together. Well, she was a workaday schooner then for the next 16 years before the next incident. This time, she had to call the Coast Guard. She was driven ashore during a gale, was in a very dangerous position near Sunken Ledge, just 2 miles south of Minot Light. The Coast Guard could not approach the vessel because of the heavy surf, heavy cargo that she carried. She was way down in the water, the heavy surf. She was just all awash. She was only 400 yards clearance from the beach. The Coast Guard was mobilizing on the beach. They were sure that she was going to beach herself there. They got the breeches buoy out. They got all the survival equipment out. And luckily, just fortunately, a tugboat came in on her way into Boston and was passing. She saw the dilemma this vessel was in, so she hooked onto her and she towed her into Boston, saved her from, well, a very dangerous position and probably a terrible accident. Well, put her back together again, and their next trip was from Jacksonville to New York, but she was blown offshore. This time broke reformist. They limped into Nassau to make repairs. The old William Bisbee continued making a living after they got her fixed up again for the Snow family. Other than the mutiny they had in 1915, things went rather smoothly until 1927, when the Stewart fell overboard and drowned. It was a terrible day with snow, rain, squalls, lots of loose water around on deck. And they were trying to anchor where they could find a little bit of shelter. The men were exhausted from doing battle for 2 days with this one raging gale of wind. And in distress, after they lost the steward, in distress, the captain hailed a passing steamship, the Allegheny. He, he put his flags up and asked for help. The steamer completely ignored the pleas, completely ignored the help wanted flags that they were flying, emergency flags they were flying, and soon disappeared in the gloom. Later on, the city of Philadelphia, sighting the rolling schooner, rushed to her aid in an effort to put a line aboard her. The wind blowing at 75 miles an hour, darkness coming on, the raging sea tossing them hither and yon. The steamboat came too close under her bow and came the bowsprit underneath her bowsprit and stove all the fore rigging all to pieces. The bowsprit, the jibboom, and all the tackle behind it all went by the board. By and by, they did get a line on board, though, and they lay all night long holding this vessel in the gale. And by morning, the wind, of course, had moderated, and they towed her into Norfolk for repairs. So the William Bisbee, in 1936, the William Bisbee was sold for just $1. $1 to become a pirate ship in the city of Tampa, Florida. Here they're going up in the river into Tampa under the bridge, and she's going to lay there to become a pirate ship, an attraction, a curiosity for the next 10 years. She lay there, all the tourists coming aboard, oohing and awing, looking at gaga at this great, big, beautiful schooner. Then, after 10 years, she was towed up the beach, up a creek there in the beach, and lay her bones in the mud, where she was left, stripped of her dignity, to die on the riverbank. I guess that's the natural burial for the Bisbee. Anyway, the next vessel, in the lineup was a vessel called the Helvetia. Helvetia, an odd name for a vessel. This vessel is a gorgeous vessel. They put her together with such care. It took 3 years to build this vessel. Here she is in 1904. In the middle of the planking process, you can see the planking's on all the way down that port side. It hasn't been finished yet. Down below, you can see all the planking and the stock laying on the beach there, getting ready to be put in there. They take that piece of plank that's going to fit on there, they put it in the steam box, steam the hell out of it, stick it on the side of her, bend it into place, and nail and trundle and spike it into place. And that's the way they build these vessels. So she's getting put together, built to the highest specification, designed to carry coal, a heavy product, and finally, she was launched in 1905. Going down the ways in 1900 on the maiden voyage, she went to Clark's Island with 155 guests, wishing her well, and thoroughly enjoying a fine day's sailing on Penobscot Bay. Let me have one of those cough songs here. You look around her rigging, and you see people there, 2 people climbing up the 4 shrouds there. Well, of course, there are a couple of people on the bowsprit. There's somebody up on the mizzenmast there, and look at the sail covers she has over her sails, just like a yacht. No expense was spared for the building of that vessel. They were so proud of that Helvetia. She was just an absolutely marvelous piece of gear. Very unusual name, Helvetia. It's a city in Switzerland. It's the city where the captain was born. But that name got the captain in trouble more than once. Communicating by megaphone to passing vessels, it was the way to do things before radio back in those days. It was customary to go close aboard and shout out your name and hailing port and destination. The communication was difficult with just a megaphone to do it with. You had to shout pretty loudly when the captain, over the roar and the wind and water and so on, he'd be passing another vessel and he would carefully enunciate, "We're the Helvetia." And then from the other vessel, there was a great long pause, whereupon the rebuttal usually came back in an angry voice, "Repeat the name." Well, after another pause, the captain would say, "We're the Helvetia." And usually the retort in an angry tone would come back, "Well, the hell with you too," and the other vessel would sail away, just as angry as he could be. But that's what it was. She was designed. It's a very successful vessel, designed to carry lumber as well as coal. And in 1923, she was overdue and soon lost. They hunted all over the up and down the coast. They couldn't find her. She was supposed to come into Charleston, South Carolina. Well, she was almost 2 months overdue. 2 months they couldn't find a vestige of her, and everybody had some terrible design of her fate. But one beautiful Saturday morning in late February, she sailed comfortably into Charleston, South Carolina, looking staunch and spick and span, as if as if there was nothing, as if she'd just been launched. Actually, they had ridden out gale after gale after gale. Be 3 times, 3 different gales blew her offshore. Every time she beat her way back, just getting near the coast again, she would be blown off by another gale of wind. Oh my God. But they had no trouble. They only had 2 inches of water in the bilge. That's nothing at all for a vessel that size. After all this time, that spoke very well of the way she was built and the way she was cared for. Well, the Helvetia was last heard from all these years, 30 years, last heard from in 1933, when she was auctioned off for $700. But at that time, a long and productive life for this for the what she was doing with the snows. And that was the end of the tale of this Helvetia. From there on, nobody knew whatever happened to her. Well, the next three vessels were magnificent vessels. They built these vessels one after another, and of course they got so used to it, they decided they would. People liked them. This particular model they really liked, so they all wanted this kind of a vessel built. So they built three of them, one right after another, and they took 3 years to build each one of them. The finest craftsmanship to carry the heaviest of cargoes. These vessels were sightly built, please the critical eye. A beautiful, beautiful hull, all of the master builder, John Gamage. Same mold, same patterns for each vessel, built carefully, as I say, over the course of 3 years for each completed schooner. They were all designed and built with consideration to the most insignificant detail by the master John Gamage, who carved this model by his own hand. From that model, that's where they built these vessels, all from the model. And you can see this model now among a host of models for the snow vessels at the Sail Power Steam Museum. This model, carved by John Gamage, master builder himself, is right there in our collection. Well, let's move on to the first vessel, the Wallanock, 1907. The Wallanock, a beautiful big white schooner named for the tribe of American Indian, Native Americans, who frequently fought with another tribe named the Tarratines, and who the Tarratines, my God, they finally got serious. They came out with the full of the moon from behind the mountain, and they almost annihilated all of the Wallanock tribe. But here is the Wallanock with people gathering on her foredeck, one man out on the bowsprit. Here again, she's getting ready for her launch. She's very close to it there, and what a magnificent hull it is. My gosh, they built some gorgeous vessels in those days. She was launched completely rigged with sails, captain and crew, and a whole crowd of well-wishers. You can see a crowd on the poop deck back there on the stern, and a crowd way up forward, down in the waist, so I can't see very much of the people down there. But there she is under full sail, and here she is with everybody aboard, having the greatest greatest time of their lives. You look down around all the girls in their big hoop skirts and their bonnets, beautiful bonnets. Way back there, even some of them in the yawl boat, hanging on the davits back on the stern. And right by the wheel is the captain with his dress blues and his captain's hat on, proud as a punch. Beautiful day sailing. Nice breeze, enough breeze and kind of moving quite well, but not enough to scare everybody. And there's one little caboose looking thing right there, right at the break of the poop, right on the top deck, on top of the quarter deck, and it just doesn't seem to fit the rest of everything. But that little caboose, I guess you can imagine what that is. All the long days sailing, the ladies have to have some place to go, and these vessels were not fitted out with that kind of accommodation. But that's apparently what that is. Everybody having such a grand time sailing along on the Wawanach. So they riz sails right away and they put her to work. That's what she was built for. So uh, she looks like one of the windjammers along the coast here, but actually she's loaded with the heaviest of paving, stone paving. So you can see she's well down on her marks, but a beautiful, beautiful vessel on her way again, loaded back. And let's see, where did she go with it? Heaviest of stone paving for Stonington, Maine, and a load of granite for New York. Newsreel, the heaviest of cargoes all the time. And speaking of heavy cargo, she news report, December 1912, she reported an unusual cargo for a schooner. She loaded a 40-ton steam locomotive on deck. You can see the rails. They still have the rails underneath her. They picked her up, railroad and all, picked her up and put her right aboard the Wawanock from the Bienvenue Granite Works in Stonington. And they brought it to Rockland where she would run over the rails to Roanoke, Virginia, on her own steam. Now, if you are Doug Lee or anybody that has read Bert Snow's book, you're going to get all excited and say that wasn't the Roanoke, that was the Mechanic. The Mechanic carried that steam locomotive. Well, I want to tell you, I got this from Richard Snow's own personal journal, and he said it was the Roanoke that carried that steam locomotive. So I just wanted to make that correction so they don't throw tomatoes at me when they see me walking down Main Street, Mechanic Street next time. Anyway, the old vessel continued on. She was only 8 years old, 8 years old when, somewhere around the 1st of May, she sunk. She sunk after a terrible gale that went down off of Lewes, Delaware, down in the Delaware Bay, trying to find shelter. And the 1st of May, she sunk. And on the 21st of May, 3 weeks later, she's still on the bottom. And the cargo being slowly, very slowly removed. It was loaded with the heaviest kind of granite for a new wing in the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And each stone weighed about 1.5 tons. There you can see in the lower right, they're picking that ton, the 1.5 ton piece of granite up. Hazardous task there, working with a sea running back and forth, and the boats all jigging back and forth. Anyway, the Merritt Wrecking Company, after spending $17,000 and weeks of perspiration, failed miserably trying to raise the vessel. They couldn't get her up off the bottom. But hallelujah, they didn't know what they were doing. Hallelujah, with the arrival of John and Dick Snow, things started to look up. They arrived with Sophie. Sophie, the absolutely incredible steam, indispensable steam lighter, and the yard tug. The crew of 15 men came. The boys, the Snow boys went to work. They put the Sophia on one side of the Wawanach and the tug Summer Smith on the other side, ran chains underneath the sunken vessel, started the big 4-inch pumps aboard the Sophie, and oh my God, she started up. Up she came. They tightened the chains. All you could hear was Sophie's 4-inch pump going chuggity, 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 chug. She's doing it. She's doing it. Sophie's doing it. 48 hours later, July 16th, and 2.5 weeks after that, she was up, dry, and ready to tow to Rockland. All patched together and dried out and ready to. It was some feat. Now I got to tell you who Sophie is. Sophie, the steam lighter. She is one of the most prized pieces of equipment the Snow family has in their fleet. Called the Sophia. She has one steam engine that runs the crane, the big crane on the bow, the propulsion, the winches, and the big 4-inch wrecker pumps and everything you can think of, all run by that one great big steam engine. He does everything. She builds docks, she dredges, he salvages other vessels, she moves 100,000 more things she can do. Anything around the yard she can do, and she does everything around the snow shipyard. It's just amazing. She isn't very speedy. She only does 4 knots, and in most cases, the captain says when she goes when she goes across the wind, she does 2 knots ahead and 2 knots sideways. So her speed is 4 knots. But everybody loves the Sophie. Everybody loves the Sophie because she'll always get the job done. Well, my God, isn't that some piece of gear? Well, after a total rebuild in the yard, the old Walmanock was uh, put back to work, and only 8 years later, Captain Anderson got the poor old Walmanock ashore. Got her ashore this time on the southeast side of McLatherdy Island off of Stonington with a 500-ton curbstone, 500 tons of curbstone bound for New York. With the snow blowing horizontally, and here, because of the gale of wind, they're trying to go between a ledge, and they get stuck on a ledge right there between Fog Island and the ledge below it. They stuck there, but the vessel wasn't really damaged at that point. Everybody took to the boats though, and they didn't know what the vessel would do. Well, the doggone vessel wiggled herself free off of that ledge that she was on and blew away. And the men in the boats, they had to row fiercely to follow where she was going in the darkness. They followed her and followed her over and over, and finally she grounded on the south side of Glatherday Island. And all 5 crewmen made it safely to Stonington. Well, now what to do? Here the vessel is half sunk. John I. Snow found out about it. And of course, the first thing he did was fire up the old Sophia, took the old Sophia over to remove the curbstone and place it temporarily on a wharf on a nearby island. There's so much of it, they had to take it ashore somewhere. Well, the contractor that had contracted to use that granite, he didn't accept it. He wouldn't accept salvage granite. And it took about a year and a half to dispose of the curbstone pieces of this curbstone. There were just curbstone all over the deck of the poor old vessel at low tide while the water wasn't covering it. And they were able to pick it off that way. My God, they couldn't, they wanted to sell it to this guy, but they wouldn't do it. They had a terrible time. Lots of finagling, was so discouraged, so discouraging. John I. Snow made the remark that this salvage job, there they are picking one of the pieces up, getting it aboard the Sophie and taking it ashore, cold and better conditions. He said, this salvage job drags life here. We ought never save another cargo unless it happens to be gold or uranium or something like that. It was such a chore to get all that stuff off of her. But they did save it in the end, and they used that granite. So all in all, it was worth it. Now the poor old Wabanach is still there on the south side of McLatherdy Island, and it's a tourist attraction now. Souvenir hunters go there. We have been along by there, and even at this late date, there are still some timbers left. At least there were back when we used to go sailing past there, and on the tree line right by McLatherdy Island. Now, I know you're wondering, but this time, where is this all going to end? What all these crazy things? Well, let's take a little break here. Let's take an airplane ride, get a little air for a change, catch your breath. Here we are over the South End. What a wonderful little community the South End of Rockland is. There's the snow shipyard right there in the center of the picture, and all ice. It's the dead of winter, all ice, all out over there. Must have been awfully bitter cold. You don't see any trees. Where are the trees? My God, the number of trees you can find there, you can count them all on one hand. Where are all the trees? Well, they put them in the stove. They got to keep warm. It wasn't a tree. They denuded everything. They used trees, wood for everything you can think of. So there was not a tree in sight. So go back now and take in the next launching, the very next launching that they had another one of these magnificent, beautiful, beautiful vessels. They look like yachts, don't they? They're just so pretty. I know these launching they're becoming so common that they only get a small place in the back of the newspaper anymore. But look at the people that have been the crowd that infected this place for this launching, shoulder to shoulder on the wharf and on deck, horses and carriages, ladies in their fancy dresses, sitting on the planking down in the foreground. They're sitting on the planking that will go into the next vessel to be built right here on these same ways, and the same kind of vessel, the same built from the same molds. Riding out on the bowsprit, there's a guy there on the foremast rigging and the mizzen rigging, even a man standing up on top of the cross trees in the mizzen, and two other guys climbing up to join him. My God sakes. She just started on her way there because you can see the tug is blowing off his whistle over there with a blast of steam. That's the tug that will retrieve her when she's afloat. The launching of the vessel, the Hugh de Paynes. And there she is, out at anchor, looking like a yacht, taking passengers ashore. You can see what a shapely schooner she is, all painted white, magnificent proportions, fenders hanging over the topsides just like a yacht. Proud skipper was Captain Outhouse. Captain Outhouse worked for the Snow family for many years on many of their vessels, and he was the proud skipper of the Hugh de Paynes. Well, first thing they did, start loading granite. That's what she was going to carry. Granite for New York for her maiden voyage. She carried lots of lumber. She survived 3 hurricanes as well. And finally, after the after 9 years, she finally came to grief, caught by another hurricane down off of Cuba. She was dismasted and she drifted for 8 days, a wrecked and broken hull. Not a bit of sail, not a mast left on her. And the crew who were aboard, they had no water, they had very little food. They 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 were out on deck. The vessel was swamped, jet right down with the decks all awash. The only thing they could do was sit on top of that main house, that house way back by the wheel there. It was just up a little bit higher, so that on the main cabin top, they slept there and spent 8 days there. It was the only semi-dry place, but the waves would break on the side of the vessel and breach right over the top of that, over their heads. They had nothing but their clothes that they were wearing for protection. Then the poor old Hugh de Paynes, poor old thing, another vessel came along. Another vessel came along, and they were able to signal this other vessel. It was a liner. They picked them up and took the crew to St. John, New Brunswick. The poor old vessel, the poor old Hugh de Paynes, she was left to her own devices. Nothing but a battered hulk at this time floating off the coast of Cuba. She was lost. She was lost for 30 days. They didn't have any idea where she was. Nobody had seen her. They couldn't get a sight of her anywhere. And after 30 days, they finally found her lying in the sand south of St. John's Bar, Florida. She had drifted 600 miles all by herself, alone, in the Gulf Stream, all the way to Jacksonville. So ended the life of this beautiful vessel, only 9 years old, still in her infancy, only 9 years old. And it was the end of her life. But don't go away. Don't go away yet. There's one more that came from the same set of molds. You can see this beautiful schooner in stocks, still but growing larger and larger each day, getting closer to launching, with a yard booming ahead full bore, with 2 steamboats on the railway in the foreground in front of her. There she is. You can see she's up, the rails are up on her. They're getting ready to plank the bulwark up, and she's really getting pretty close to her launch. Well, her launching came at an inauspicious time. The launching happened in a line school in the afternoon, a line school with turbulent waves dashing over the breakwater. My God, Captain Snow said that if I'd known it was going to blow like hell, if it was going to rain so hard and blow and hard, rain even harder, he said, I wouldn't have tried to launch her. But I got the thing started, and I'm damned if I'm going to stop now. So another amazing launching at the Snow Shipyard, but not a soul out there to view it. Nobody's watching. It has to do it all by itself. Named for the Native American tribe, the Tarantine, the Tarantine that almost whipped out all the others, the Wawanocks. She was the last of that triad, the most modern of the snow-built three-masted schooners. She had a double drum hoisting steam engine connected to her hide windlass, and a messenger chain all hooked up to a powerful steam donkey. There were cabins finished in oak, Oregon pine masts, the finest kind, two 2,000-pound anchors, and a 22-foot yawl boat. So the yawl boat is power for maneuvering. She was painted white, given a most attractive appearance. No detail had been overlooked, but with extreme care, everything was done just right. Launched October 3rd, 1913. Here's the only picture of her. Beautiful, beautiful schooner. Built for the coastal trade to carry about 475 tons of cargo. In 2 weeks, she will be ready for her maiden voyage. There's the only picture of her working, tied up in front of the salt shed at Snow Shipyard. News item: schooner Tarantine went ashore on a reef on the Sayona Islands, Santo Domingo, September 17th, 1915. 2 years old, declared a total loss. Anson B. Outhouse, the skipper, and 6 men were saved. They were bound for New York with a deck load of flat cars and general cargo. In the hold, Chicago was insured, but the vessel was only partly insured. Hurricane, just 2 years ago, the cost of $35,000. Sad, sad ending for that magnificent vessel. Well, now hold on to your hats. Don't go away. Now we're getting to the really big vessels. The damn vessels are getting so big now we had to add another mast. So the four-masted class came into view. Four-masted vessel. And so the Snows decided they would build one of these picket fence schooners, they called them. They get over three masts. They were far more common three-masters than the four-masters. And of course, the five-masters were even fewer yet. Six-masters, there are only 7 six-master schooners ever built. A picket fence schooner, they called them. But the schooner just the same. They decided they would build one, and they would name it the Helvetia. They would use the same frames and the same plans, the same molds that they used for the Helvetia, but they would add 10 more frames and 1 more mast. So in 1917, with 90 men working in the yard, they began what they thought would be the schooner Helvetia II. But money talks and plans change. So, although the keel had already been stretched, the frames had already been standing, no matter, it was quickly sold to the Atlantic Maritime Company, after which they renamed her the Edith Newt. The Edith Newt. The keel was cut and it was lengthened out 175 feet because it was decided she would become a motor ship. And look at that forest of frames. They put in more keel, put in more frames, and that was the style after all. That was nothing like this had been done before. Nothing at all like this had ever been built on the East Coast. She was launched. She was launched in August. In August, less than 4 months from her beginning. In less than 4 months, they added to her keel and added frames and built the rest of the vessel on top of it. She proved to be very able and well built for the trade. but only had the privilege of living for 5 years. The Edith Newt, Chatham, Massachusetts, March 1922. The Edith Newt went ashore on the beach. Her navigator mistook the lighthouse for the light offshore, and an unsuccessful attempt was made at high water to refloat the vessel. It was reported she was half full of water and the engines are submerged. So that was the end of the motor vessel Edith Newt. Hallelujah, hallelujah. One last one coming up. Don't go away. One more vessel coming up. The last of the sailing vessels at the end of World War I, 1918. The days of sailing vessels in commerce was about to go into history. The very first vessel built by the Snows was launched May 24, down in the lower left-hand corner there, 1864. The very first vessel. Now, 31 vessels later, 55 years later, I.L. Snow Company decided to build one more final vessel in their shipyard, a four-masted schooner named Keating. Big four-masted schooner. There she is right there. They got together at the time of launching the Newt. They got together that same day. They'd already been working on the side when they got the Newt together, and they'd been working on the side, and the keel and the frames for this next four-masted schooner were already hewn out and ready to be set in place. They went to work Saturday morning, August 4th, 1917, and had the full crew working. They launched the Newt. The first thing you do, knock the blocks out under the Newt, and they launched her that morning. That afternoon, they stretched the keel for the new four-master immediately and started framing the new vessel that afternoon. She was completed and ready to be launched that next April. Can you believe that? Ready to be launched that next April. There she is. The weather was bad. They had to wait until May 1st. Only 8 months they built this four-masted schooner. Tell me they didn't know how to do it. And they had it ready to launch. Suddenly and quietly, she was sold to a Baltimore owners who changed the name to the Dorothea Brinkman. The Dorothea Brinkman, but they were too late to change the name on the stern of the vessel, so she's still called the Keating at her launching. There were all the details of her launching. Fantastic launching it was. Magnificent launching. Doing 10 knots sternway coming down the ways there. My God, unbelievable. And and just clouds of smoke underneath the bow there, and up on the mizzen mast, you can see the third mast back. There's John Hyde Snow doffing his cap to the crowd at this great launch. And on the mainmast, as you can see the second mast back, that's John Gamage, the master builder that built this vessel. The smoke on the ways when these vessels they used to launch them, there's such heavy things sliding down on those rails that it would get awfully hot. They used pig fat on them to grease them up so that they wouldn't stop on the way down. And the pig fat would get so hot sometimes it would catch fire, making the launching even more exciting. And here they are, the smoke pouring out underneath the bow of the vessel as she makes her way. Oh man, into the poor old ship, just with this magnificent vessel as she was. She just certainly a beautiful thing. Look at the length of her hair. Look at the tear on her and how graceful she looks. What a glorious heartbreaker because the poor old thing only lasted 5 years. This magnificent vessel was lost March 22nd, 1924, at Oregon Inlet, North Carolina. The whole crew of 8 were saved. Why does it seem these vessels can't last more than 5 years? Her hull was in perfect condition at only 5 years. Oh, and I guess the yard must have been in a fit of inertia because immediately after the Brinkman launching, May 1st, 1919, They lay the keel for another four-masted schooner. Oops. Oh, they lay the keel. Yeah, that's right. Sorry about that. That is the Brinkman under sail. And in 1919, they laid keel for another four-masted schooner, just like her. Same length, same, all the same, from the same molds. They lay down another keel for the next vessel in line. Same size. They stretched the keel, same dimension, framed up, same scale. Why not? They knew how to do it. They built the other one in such a short time. They had to do this one. The readiness, they were all set to do it. So they planked it, they painted it, they rigged it, but it was never bought. They never launched it. 1920s, it was ready. 1926, it sat there till 1926, and here she is being torn down. They're cutting her up and using the wood for other purposes. You never saw the water. The grand days of the sailing vessel are over. The grand age of sail went into history. It was given over to the steam and motor vessels. The railroads carried the freight. Everyone just couldn't wait to buy a horseless carriage. 31 sailing vessels in 55 years. The snow shipyard sailing vessel era was over. They continued building smaller boats. They built awful lot of really magnificent vessels. They were building yachts. They built a lot of fishing vessels, draggers, bait carriers, fish boats, utility vessels of all kinds. Here are two fish boats, two identical fish boats that they built. They had wonderful launching there. The two of them built together. They launched them both on the same tide. They were both owned by the same company, and they had a huge crowd watching that kind of launching. They went on and on, and over the course, an awful lot of rebuilding, awful lot of maintenance and repairs on their railway. They had two tugboats. They rebuilt the Tug Hugh and sold it. The other one, the Summer Smith, they kept for use around the yard to do various jobs around the yard. Well, they also had since they had all these cluster of skilled men, they would frequently have outside jobs that were sometimes quite unusual and challenging. Here's one for you. They built the stack for the mill up in Union, and they delivered it February 1921. They delivered it with a horse cart like that, a Gallimander wheel in the center, and a little steering. Built it in the yard down here in the snow shipyard and took it to Union. Can you imagine? I can't imagine the challenge of a thing like that. Well, that's what they used to do. One day, the old telephone hanging up on the wall in John I. Snow's office, one of those in that building right there, probably, started suddenly ringing like it was going to fling itself off of the hook. Well, one of the gang came by, reached over, grabbed it, and said hello. And someone on the other end said in a very loud voice, "Captain John I. Snow, please." So the skipper took the phone and he said, "Hello." And the voice said, "I understand you are in the towage and lightery business in Rockland, and you are an expert in salvage and all marine affairs." Challengingly, the voice continued, "Looky here. I've got this house in Pittsburgh on the Kennebec River, and I want it in Rockport. Can you do the job?" Well, John I. Snow went and looked at it, and here was this magnificent house. Chimneys, cupola. He scratched his head, and finally he answered, "Yep, I think so." That's all there was to that. Voice, however, continued with the same challenging tone. "Well, how much will it be to move it?" "Well," replied Captain Snow, "for a long time I have wanted one of those big car floats from down in New York. those big car floats they take railroad cars on. They have one in New York Harbor now. I need it for my business down here in Maine. I know where there is one, secondhand, which can be bought pretty cheap. I'll go get it. I'll go get it and I'll move your house. And I'll set your house down Rockport. You come when I got it set up. You come and look at it. And if the job is satisfactory, you pay for the float and it belongs to me. If you don't like the job, you can keep the car float and I'll forget all about any charges. So the deal was made. John, I got the float. John, I got the float, and with Sophie's help, good old Sophie was there. Sophie, the old steamlighter, with his help, he skidded the house onto the car float, the house in Pittsburgh, and with his own tug and the help of Sophie, of course, they towed that vessel around. Oh, the foundation came. There's Sophie picking up the foundation. I forgot that. And they took that foundation as well, took everything all at once and went around the outside with the Summer Smith towing the barge and the good old Sophia pushing from the other end and skidded the house in Rockport in place. The owner came down to take a look at it. God, it was perfect. It was perfect. Not a crack in the plaster, not a crack in the cupola. All four tall chimneys were in place, and the house was in perfect condition. When John asked about it, old John Eichnow, he didn't have too much to say. He's a very modest man. But press him a bit, and he might say, well, there was one particularly unusual and interesting thing on the way down. The old Maine fog shut in thicker than mud. And when we got out by Popham and the old tug turned out, he was blowing one long and two short, the towing signal. And to make sure, I had a man way up in the cupola of that house with a fish horn, and he was blowing the same, one long and two short. And well, we turned at Seguin Island, just off Seguin Island. We were about to make the turn to the eastward when we heard a jingle of engine room bells through the fog, close aboard to starboard, loud and anxious. And the moment thereafter, the white hull of a steam yacht broke out, cutting through that old thick mud fog. He had her engines going full astern with a jingle, as full astern as she could get. You could see the smoke pouring out of her stack. Her skipper had got a glint in the fog, and my God, he saw a house looming up dead ahead and thought, oh my God, I'm right on the highway. I'm going to run into a house. Well, he said, I had to laugh a bit. There was not less than 40 fathom of water all around us. Well, that was the story of moving the Spite House to Rockport. Then came the war. All through the war effort, they had 1,000 people building ships just as fast as they could build them. They built all kinds of wooden vessels, minesweep, net tenders, sub chasers, and salvage vessels. Look at the yard here. Look at the piles and piles of wood all over the place here. They've got 3 net tenders underway there. They've got one to the right, lower right here. They've got one to the upper left, and a second one next to it, just barely starting it, put it together. Uh, 3 net tenders underway at the same time, and they're just sawing wood. They had 1,000 people working, sawing wood and building vessels as fast as they could during the war. They got a contract to build 10 coastal minesweeps. All these were large wooden vessels. They had to have wooden vessels because the mines are magnetized and they would stick to a steel vessel and blow them up. They built so many scores and scores of vessels, many too many to elucidate here. The yard was recognized for their ability and their integrity building all these vessels. They were awarded the receipt of the coveted 5 stars on their Army Navy flag, proving their value for outstanding service. We have this flag on display at the Sail Power Steam Museum. There's what the net tenders look like. Great big vessels. They would cover a net across the seaports to keep submarines from moving in and sinking vessels in the various seaports. Here's another one of a different model, more of a battleship, but multi-purpose vessel, and so on and so forth. They built them and built them and built them. After the war, the property was divided into two parcels and several other businesses, and down through you can see General Seafoods and National Sea Products, and finally Rockland Marine Corporation. Now they are our neighbors, and we were able to buy. We're outward bound, bought the westernmost property there, and that's where the Sail Power and Steam uh, Museum is now. So here, uh, the Rockland Marine Corporation, our next door neighbor, still maintains two railways, it says here, but they have three railways now. They not only build, but they do an awful lot of repairs. They're one of the few, very few, commercial yards along the coast of Maine now. And the original house is still there. That original little round building, it's eight-sided building actually, that used to be with the capstan and a team of horses who turned the capstan around and drew the vessels up on the railway. The railway is still there with a power vessel on it, but that's the only surviving snow building surviving to this day from the old shipyard days. Well, here's an amazing list of the vessels owned by the Snow family. You can pursue that at your leisure. Many schooners, many sailing vessels, all different kinds. Some of them bought and sold, some of them wrecked. So it's just an amazing array, and every single one of them is a sea story. Well, if you're getting bored, disgusted, and desperately need a book to read, think of this one, With Reckless Abandon. They're my memoirs. It's 40, 50, 60 years of voyaging. We're still on it, and uh, well, there are all sea stories in there, all kinds of different vessels. I own four of the biggest schooners on the coast here, and the tales are there. Some of them are even true. You'll enjoy that book, I guarantee you, or I won't even charge you for it. That's a rash statement, I know. Well, I want to let you know the captain's quarter, all of the count the vessel you like best. Look at them, the Angelique, the Mary Day, the Victory Charms, the American Eagle, the Reagan, all of these different vessels. They don't tells all about the whole Camden fleet there. The timber, we did tugboats, we did schooner cooks, we did everything you think of. There's the Morning in Maine, the captains, the square rigger captains, Jack Prohl's book, and so on and so forth. You can look at it over. They're all on YouTube. You can go on our website and pick out any one of them that you would like to see. These are the most recent of them, all the way down. You can see April 22, the last one there, the Snow Shipyard Part 3, and that concludes the dissertation. But thank you. I couldn't do it without you. One of me to remember that put these kids out in boats. Donations are encouraged. We look forward to it and most gratefully received. We've got to do something to keep our younger group, our youth out there sailing, out there sailing. Now, I want to say this is the end. Comments, please. Are there any comments? Please drop your muting and ask me a question or two. And if there's no questions, I guess that's a compliment. That means I covered the subject from A to Z, and nobody has any questions. Well, I'll be available at the museum. Come see me, and I'll answer any questions you may have or you may think of between now and then. So, thank you very much. I'm Captain Jim Sharp, signing off.